the present moment is not a concept, but it's the reality of you. What takes you out of the recognition that you are the present moment is that idea of yourself being diminished by a future event, which is anxiety. The looking back at the past or looking at other people's lives and relative to your idea of yourself, if that past idea of self you deem to be more positive, or your idea of someone else you deem to be more positive or better than your current idea of yourself, that's where depression sets in. So as you let go of clinging to that idea of yourself and recognizing that that's not actually the truth of what you are, there isn't as much space for things like anxiety, future focused, things like depression, past and external focused. Then there's nothing left to take you out of the recognition of your awareness of the moment.
Andrew, welcome to the podcast, my man. How's it going?
Alex, going well. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited for this. I came across your stuff on TikTok. I think it's probably 2020 now. I think is when you always used to have the blue sky. Like back in the day, it was always the blue sky behind you. And I was like, oh, this guy's interesting. Like I can tell he's like younger than younger than me, but he seems very wise. And I've seen over the years how your what you talk about and what you share has changed shape, not dramatically, but I can see the shift in what you've been speaking about. But I guess the best place for us to start would be like what got you onto this path in the first place of like personal growth, development, etc., etc.
Yeah. So going back to right around high school, when I was 15, 16, dealt with a lot of social anxiety, just cared a lot about what people thought of me, how other people were perceiving me, like constantly worrying about the future. And if someone had told me like, oh, like the present moment is all there is, it's all you ever are, I would have been like, what the hell are you talking about? Like I was entirely living inside of my head in these fictions of reality, and based on my perception of how I thought things were. And I later on realized that those perceptions were never the truth of what things actually are. And so through college, those sorts of feelings naturally got a little bit better. But it wasn't until towards the end of college, like right after college, I got into like the book, The Power of Now and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck were like the first two that I came across that sort of helped me get into the spiritual realm and just like caring a lot less about what people thought of me. And the first thing that I was able to recognize was that, you know, I was always so concerned with how people were thinking of me, like what people were thinking about me, what their opinions of me were. And it was debilitating. It caused me to be very, very quiet in high school because I figured, well, if I just don't really say much at all, then people can't have a negative opinion of me. It doesn't mean they're going to have a positive opinion of me. They're just going to probably be like, oh yeah, nice kid, kind of quiet, whatever. And that's exactly how it went. But inside there was a ton of suffering. So one of the first things I recognized was that people just weren't thinking about me as much as I thought they were. Like they have their own entire life, their own entire experience, their own worries and fears and shit that they go through every single day. And so that was a very freeing recognition to begin with. Towards the end of college, got into meditation, just kind of observing all those thoughts that I had taken to be the truth of what I was, recognized that I was closer to the awareness of them without fully recognizing it. I think early on in my content, it was very much conceptual, and now it's like the application of it, and I'm embodying what I talk about as opposed to just like understanding it on a conceptual level. So after college, got into all that stuff. It helped me a ton. And then it wasn't until mid 2020, I kind of realized there's a whole story with like getting into content, but I basically recognized like, I don't suffer as much as I used to. I've learned a lot of things. Why don't I just share things that have helped me? Figure, you know, as humans, we're not so different. If something helped me, it'll probably help someone else. Start sharing. And that was like another hurdle in terms of fear of judgment that I had to overcome with finally like actually putting myself out there for anyone and everyone to judge, and being okay with how I was perceived by the masses potentially eventually. And so, yeah, and then content has been a whole other journey, and my recognitions there have shifted, as you mentioned, gotten probably deeper and clearer on the reality of what I actually am beyond all the conceptual. So yeah, that's more or less a little bit about the story of Andrew.
I love that. I love that, man. And what did you notice was different? Like you said that there was less suffering, but what was it particularly that you were noticing that was different that then, made you go that extra step to start sharing, your learnings and what you were experiencing?
Yeah, so when it came to finally posting content, there's actually a sort of specific story about that. And it started about a year and a half before I started posting content. It was soon after I started getting into meditation related things. And it was an exercise I would go through. I don't have a very structured morning routine anymore. I used to for about 3 years. I meditated every day. I did positivity affirmations. I did all that stuff for about an hour every single morning. And one of the exercises I went through was I imagined being old. I imagined going through my life, kind of jumping every 5 years. At the time, I was like, I don't know, 23, 24 ish. And I would imagine, being 30, then 35, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 till I got there. And then I would sit in that feeling and imagine being 100 years old and imagine being old and wrinkly and about to die, essentially. And then I would think back on my life and think, what do I regret about my life? What do I wish I had done differently if I could go back to the point that I'm at now? But in that state, I fully felt like I was 100 years old. And the thing that came up every single day was my regret was that I didn't create content, was that I didn't make videos or put myself out there, because for whatever reason, I don't know why, that was the thing that came up. It just was. It was like something deep down that for so long I'd suppressed, like being my true authentic self and expressing myself. And I think usually, whatever that saying is, like our biggest fear is the doorway to our greatest success or peace and joy is like on the other side of that fear. And so I think that was a big thing for me, was that fear of judgment, that fear of putting myself out there. For whatever reason, started to bubble up, and it was like, I would regret if I don't do this, not posting and creating content. So I went through that exercise for like a year and a half, and I still wasn't posting content, even though I knew I was going to regret it, because I was still afraid. I was still afraid of taking that final step of like really putting myself out there and how I was going to be perceived, especially early on. Like it's a lot different starting out versus where I'm at now. Like now people think it's cool because I have followers and whatnot. But at first people were like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? What's happening? Like, are you good, dude? Like I was getting texts from friends, and it's like so funny thinking back to that. But it was nice because I had sort of let go of my care of what people thought of me, like right before I started posting content. And then so it was finally like after a year and a half, I basically got to a point I was like, I know for a fact I'm going to regret this if I don't do it. Like I don't have a choice anymore. I have to do this. Like, and then I started, and it's been a journey ever since, but that's more or less the story of me getting into content, was just that exercise I went through every morning until I finally realized that I don't have a choice anymore and I have to just start.
I love that. Didn't have a choice anymore. Yeah, do you know what? That resonates with me so much. I kind of feel like I had a similar thing. The story's slightly different, but it was a similar thing. I had like a couple of accounts that I'd set up. One was like a Tumblr page, and one was an Instagram page where I was like posting anonymously, and I was just sharing like cool stuff that I found on the internet and why it inspired me. And then the other page on Instagram was like just cool quotes that I would come across that would inspire me, and I'd just share them. And a lot of it is because I didn't want to put myself out there. Like there was some fear there. I knew that I wanted to share. And I think the thing that I'm hearing in which is similar, I think for both of us, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like when you see the change in your own life through whatever the previous suffering was, whatever the previous situation was, and you see the change in your own life, it's like you want to tell people about it because you want to help them. Like you said, humans aren't too different. We all have some kind of suffering in our own way, and it's like you want to share it so that you can help someone else, even if it's just one person. And at first it was like this whole, I'm going to do it anonymously kind of thing. But then it was like, when I decided I was going to start my podcast, for example, I was like, I need to start put myself out there a bit more. And then I did this thing where it was like, and this isn't just about making content as well for anyone who's listening. This is just like facing up to something that looks like a fear. And what I did was just put myself right in the face of it. And it was like I did this thing where I created a video, 1 minute video every day for about 30 days. So I'd used to walk to the train station in the morning to get to work. And while I was walking, I'd just get my phone and I just like, right, what do I want to talk about today? Okay, I'm going to talk about that. Right, record 60 seconds, bang, let's see if I can get it. And I just used to do that. And then it just became like a thing. It's just like I didn't think about it anymore. There was no like, oh, what if people think this? What if people think that? Am I good enough? Do I talk well enough? Do I articulate myself? All of that just kind of fell away because the proof was in the pudding.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I resonate with that. And I'm trying to think. Oh, with the pseudo name that you started out like posting anonymously, I did the same exact thing when I first created a TikTok account. So in college, everyone called me Andy. So when I would go out and like my sort of like drunk alter ego name was Randy. And I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Shawshank Redemption, but
Yeah.
the main character's name is Andy Dufresne. So people would call because Murnane sounds like Dufresne. So it was just like there's a lot to that story. But basically, my original TikTok name was Randy Dufresne because I
Yes.
do you
I
remember?
remember. Yeah, I
Do you
remember. Now that
remember?
you said it,
Oh
I'm like,
shit!
yeah, I remember. Because I remember seeing the name change. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, that because that was early on that I shifted that. I changed that like I don't know within the first month maybe probably before I even had like 10,000 followers on TikTok that I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I trying to hide this stuff? Like it's starting to pick up some steam. And so I changed it back. But no, I resonate with that a lot. And I think, yeah, early on, it's just about starting. Like so many people get so caught up in comparing themselves and that sort of cliche like don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. And but it's so true because looking back on all of my content, like I look back at some of those original videos that I posted within the first 6 months to a year of posting, like my energy is significantly different in those videos. It's much more rigid. It's much more like just not very free. It's like confined into like trying to be something for everyone. And now it's very much just like being myself, I guess. I don't know. There's a much different energy to my stuff now. So it's hard for me even to go back and look at some of those original videos because I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, this is so different than how I am now. But at the same time, that was a requirement. That was entirely necessary to get me to where I'm at now. I couldn't have made the videos that I do now without making those videos and going through that. So it's so important for people when they're starting, especially with any new venture, to sort of like give themselves some slack and be like, I'm probably going to suck at this for a little while, and that's okay. But I have to suck in order to get better and improve and learn from it and go through it. Like I've never purposefully tried to improve the way that I talk in my videos or the sort of energy that I bring to my videos. I've never purposefully done it. But if you look back at all my videos, like if you checked a video like every month since I started, you would see a drastic shift in the way that I did it. But it's just from doing it so many times and like getting more and more comfortable and shedding, the idea that I'm trying to be something for anyone and just being myself, expressing myself authentically. And at everyone's core, they have that. And I think a lot of times it's just process of getting there. It's practice, it's repetition, absolutely. But it's all in there from the beginning. You just have to work through all of the learned judgments and perceptions about yourself and like what you think you are and letting go of all of those to get to the core of the truth of what you are, which is what lies beyond all of those beliefs about what you think you are. So going through with content, it's like that first podcast episode or that first video you create will probably not be as good as the 10th, which probably won't be as good as the 100th. But in order to make the 100th, you have to make the 10th. In order to make the 10th, you have to make the first. So it's just important to remember that and kind of cut yourself some slack early on, I think, which can be very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, that goes for any walk of life. You going into a new job, or taking up a new hobby or learning a language or anything. Like, you can't expect to be good at it to begin with. Like, we're all novices at everything that we start new. That's how, it's just how it is. And in order to, I guess, progress, you need to stay with it. And I'm really seeing this in a lot of different areas in my life. Like, you can look at, I don't know, exercise. You know, the first time you go to the gym or you go and join a fitness class, like, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. You're going to feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I doing it right? But the more you do it, the more you stay with it, the more you just naturally progress. It's not like a trying thing. Like you said, there's no like trying to progress. It just happens by nature. And I love what you said just a second ago about, you know, stepping back from all of those beliefs and all of those stories to what you really are. So in your opinion, what is it that any of us really are?
So I think it's hard to say what you are. It's easier to say what you're not, which is you're never what you think you are. All of those concepts, all of those beliefs, all of those strengths, weaknesses, stories you tell yourself out every single day, identity based things that you cling to try and create this false sense of certainty about what you are is never what you actually are. And you are what's left when you peel back all of those things that you think you are. Anytime a thought comes up, it's like, oh, I'm bad at this because, you know, I've done this in the past and it didn't go well. It's like, that's not true. That's not the truth of what you are. You being bad at that has nothing to do with the reality of what you actually are right now. You're not. But as long as you cling to that, you'll bring that into every single moment, and that will limit you. Like, labels and limitations go hand in hand. I got to give out a shout out to his TikTok handles the Bald Stage on TikTok and Instagram, I think. But we just had him on my podcast recently, and he said that, and it stuck with me. Like, labels equals equal limitations. And so anytime we try to define ourselves, we're limiting ourselves, because we are infinite potential in every single moment. We are the eternal awareness of the universe, the eternal intelligence of reality at our core. But all of the labels that we place on top of that, all of the layers that we build up to create this false sense of certainty in an entirely uncertain world, is what limits us from recognizing the truth of what we are, being that infinite potential, being what lies beyond everything that we try to label ourselves as. And we are just here now, some semblance of awareness here now that has infinite potential. So whenever something comes up about what you think you are, just question it, because you can know that it's not the truth of what you are. And beyond that lies all of the potential of anything and everything you could ever possibly be.
I love that. It's kind of, it feels like a really creative space, you know? It's like when you can recognize that the labels and the stories that we live by aren't what we really are. Like you said, the labels equals limitation. I love that. It's like if we can step away from the limitation, then we're open to, I guess, create ourselves however we want in any moment. We're able to create our life however we want in any moment. And that's, for me, has been one of the most like freeing experiences of life, is like realizing that, oh, actually, I wrote a post about this earlier. It was, actually, let me read it to you real quick. So I wrote, the I or me isn't fixed, it's fluid. Our ideas about ourselves are always changing, but we can get stuck in a story about ourselves and who we think we are. The funny thing is, this story is entirely made up. It's thought created. So when I say I or me, who are you really referring to? What does that I represent to you? For a long time, the I represented a collection of stories about myself. Seeing that this story wasn't fixed and was simply made up, my thought-created personality died. I saw that who I am is way more malleable than I ever realized. I can choose who I am being in any moment.
Amen. Hell, fuck yeah, that was awesome, dude. That's like exactly what I'm talking about. It's like
Yeah.
that idea of ourself that we bring into every single moment is exactly what limits us. And but when you recognize that, oh, you're creating that story, like you are the one, even for something like suffering, and people don't really like this take on suffering, but who's telling you that you're suffering besides you? And it's not to say that pain isn't a thing that we experience, but pain and suffering are not the same thing. Suffering is something that you create within yourself when you bring in all of your beliefs about the way you think things should be, or the way you hope things will be, or the way you fear things might be. Like, there's the way things are, and then there's the way you think things should be, fear things might be, hope things will be. And all of those, that gap between the way things are and all of those things I just mentioned, is suffering. And it's like a resistance to the reality that is here and now. And it comes back to the idea of control versus influence. Like, hoping things will be a certain way, fearing things might be a certain way, like those are all rooted in this false sense of control, that you have the potential to control how something is going to turn out, which is never actually available to you. Control is a complete illusion. But what you do have, and what you missed out on when you get too caught up in trying to hold on to this false sense of control, is you do have influence here and now. But as you cling to that idea of control, which our entire society tends to do fairly often, which leads to feelings of anxiety when you feel like you're starting to lose that control, which you never actually had, we miss out on the influence that we have here and now, the ability to look around and be like, okay, what can I do with this situation? Instead, we get so caught up in like, oh, I hope this turns out this way, or I fear this turns out this way. It's like, what do you have influence over here and now? Because as long as you're clinging to that control, you're missing out on the potential impact that you can have here and now. And so I think the ideas of ourself just kind of ties in to that, because it's all caught up in our mind. Like, the ideas that we cling to, that we bring in from the past, essentially, like all those ideas come from the past, from things we've experienced. We bring them into the moment, and that inherently limits us from seeing the potential of what we're capable of right now. So as you let go of all of those ideas of what you think you are, what's left is being anything and everything, and relaxing into the recognition that everything beyond this moment is completely uncertain, sucks you back from being future focused into the present moment as well, and recognizing that you have that influence in the moment. But as long as you're clinging to ideas and hopes and fears, you won't see the potential influence you have in every single moment.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So how would you then just, maybe not describe, let me ask that in a different way. To you, what does it mean to be fully present?
I think just, I think first of all, it's recognizing that the present, because sometimes we get caught up in the idea that, oh, the present moment is a thing that I can be in the present moment or out of the present moment, or when I'm caught up in fear and worry and anxiety and depression, like I'm not in the present moment. But the reality is that the present moment is the core of what you are. You've never been anywhere else. Even when you're fearing what might happen in the future, you're doing it now. When you're thinking back and regretting something about the past, you're doing it now. But the idea of ourself is all rooted in the past. So when we recognize that the awareness of this moment is the only thing we ever are, awareness of the story, awareness of the fear, awareness of the feelings that we're feeling in the moment, we recognize that that awareness is only ever here and now. And that's the truth, closer to the truth of what we are, is just some semblance of awareness in the moment. So as we can sort of recognize that, it separates out that idea of ourself to the reality of what we are. So it's letting go, it's questioning all of the things that you believe to be the truth, recognizing that, you know, your awareness here now is the truth of what you are, and the present moment is not a concept, but it's the reality of you at the end of the day. So when it comes to being present, I think some short-term things that can help are things like focusing on your senses, like what can you see, what can you smell, what can you hear, what can you feel, because those are always happening now. Focusing on your breath is always happening now. But, you know, something that's longer term and maybe more impactful is letting go of that idea of yourself, because what takes you out of the recognition that you are the present moment is the idea, is the fear of you know, that idea of yourself being diminished by a future event, which is anxiety. The looking back at the past, or looking at other people's lives and relative to your idea of yourself, if that past idea of self you deem to be more positive, or your idea of someone else you deem to be, you know, more positive or better than your current idea of yourself, that's where depression sets in. So as you let go of clinging to that idea of yourself and recognizing that that's not actually the truth of what you are, there isn't as much space for things like anxiety, future focused, things like depression, past and external focused. And so then there's nothing left to take you out of the recognition of your awareness of the moment, because that idea that you cling to is always what sort of causes those intrusive thoughts that seemingly like has the feeling of taking you out of the present moment. Because beyond that, it's just the awareness of the moment that you're experiencing, what you're doing in the moment when you let go of all of those ideas.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of letting go, I think, is a really powerful one, because I heard it said once. I can't remember where I heard it now, but I'm pretty sure I heard it on a podcast one time. But the guy described like what it means to be present is like when your mind and your body are focused on the same thing at the same time. So like when you're present in the present moment, in inverted commas, is like when you're just focused on what's happening in front of you. Like we're having this conversation, we're focused on it, we're present in this moment. My mind's not wondering about, oh, am I coming across okay? What about, what am I having for dinner later? What's happening tomorrow? What's my to-do list like tomorrow? It's here and now. And it's like really aligning to that is like a letting go of those stories. And also I guess the awareness that we're still going to experience some of those thoughts. We're still going to experience anxious thoughts. We're still going to experience quote unquote sad thoughts. We're still going to experience happy thoughts, right? But they still aren't us. We're the ones who hear them. We hear them, we experience them, but the one who experiences them and the one who hears them are different. The one who experiences them is still the self, is still the created version of ourselves, because I've heard this thought and now it means this about, I've experienced this thought and now it means this about me. But the one who hears it is the awareness that you were talking to. And I think that's like a really beautiful way to try to understand it, shall we say.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think with those, when the thoughts arise, when the fear, when the anxiety arises, not resisting that is very important. Like recognizing that we label all of those things as we have like this box of positive emotions like happiness, joy, like excitement, enthusiasm, all this stuff. And that's awesome. And I think it's amazing if most of the time you're experiencing those. And then we have this box of, negative emotions like fear, worry, anxiety, depressed feelings, whatever. And so because we have those labels, when those feelings arise, when those feelings, that feeling of nervousness arises, for example, because as a society, we've labeled that as a bad thing. Because personally, for most people, we've labeled that as a bad thing. We immediately resist it. And that resistance keeps it around. Like the quote, what you resist persists, is one of my favorite quotes. And so what can help with that is letting go of the label that anything you feel is bad, that any thought you hear is bad, because as soon as you label something as bad, you'll immediately resist it and try and get rid of it when it arises, because you don't want to feel those bad things. But if you let go of the label that it's bad, all of a sudden it's just something that you're feeling. And when it's just something that you're feeling, you allow it to be. There's nothing there to resist, because it is no longer projected as something that is bad that you need to get rid of. And as you allow it to be, as you sort of just accept it and are attentive to it, like you were just saying, in the present moment is when your mind and body are connected, when the feelings inside of you, when you're attentive to them but not resistant to them, they pass through you significantly more quickly than when you're resisting them. So as those feelings arise, letting go of the label that it's something that is even bad to begin with, and just seeing it for what it is. Maybe it's not the most comfortable thing, but it doesn't mean it's bad because we labeled it as bad because we have these thoughts about the feeling. But as you let go of the labels about the feelings, just feel them for what they are. They're not really that bad of a thing. And through that, it almost like transmutes them and allows them to pass through you significantly more quickly. But again, you have to let go of the labels that it's even something that's bad, whether it's a thought or a feeling.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. It's like almost like an energy that passes through us, right? It's like the energy passes through us, and it's like we can deem it, no matter what the energy is, to be negative or positive or good or bad or whatever. and it's neither. It's just neutral. And the thing is, like, I think this is a really important thing as well, is really and truly, I think one of the limitations we have as human beings is that we're never just going to experience the feeling or the emotion as neutral. We're gonna always add some kind of subjective story to it. Oh, this is good, this is bad, this is positive, this is negative. Even if we're not trying to, it will naturally happen. But I guess resting in the awareness that that's not the reality of the experience. We've created that experience by the label we've put on it. Just resting in that is enough.
Yeah. No, one of my favorite three words that are very applicable to this are I don't know, because we get so caught up in the immediate judgments of things and thinking like, oh, I'm going through the situation, like say for example, doing an interview, and it's just you're super nervous about it because you think the best case scenario is getting a job. But what if you don't know? The reality is you don't know if getting that job is actually the best case scenario. That could be, you could bomb this interview, not get the job. Next job you apply for is a much better situation for the rest of your life. So bombing that interview was actually the best case scenario, that and yet there you were beforehand being so worried about getting the job, when in reality you were worried about the worst case scenario. Like you were worried about the best case scenario happening, being not getting the job. So when you recognize that you don't know, you don't actually know what anything's going to lead to in any moment, those judgments, they're harder to have almost when you recognize that you don't actually know what the best case outcome is for a situation, when you can really see that. And it takes, given it takes some practice, because it can be tough at first for people to see that and be like, what do you mean? Like, I know this is, wrong. And sometimes you have to go through some things and maybe go through some tougher situations and see the benefits of it come to fruition later down the road, to be like, oh, I thought that was a really terrible situation. I labeled it as bad the entire time. It led to this, and this, which wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone through that. Like in my life, for example, going through social anxiety that I talked about before when I was younger, 15, 16, when I was going through that, it sucked. Like it was not fun at all. But to say it's bad, it's up for debate. Absolutely. Because I don't think I would be on this podcast right now if I hadn't gone through that 12 years ago. So can you really say that it's bad, or was it just entirely necessary to get me to where I am right now? And all of a sudden, the good and the bad, it's kind of like it's not worth wasting energy labeling everything as good or bad. So when you're going through something moving forward, you can be like, honestly, I don't know. So there's not really anything left to worry about, because you don't know what actually the best case scenario is. But as long as you think you do know, there's always going to be space for fear and worry and anxiety. But the reality is you never do, because everything beyond this moment right now is completely uncertain. So as you relax into that uncertainty and become comfortable in that state of uncertainty, there's very little that can be left to shake you.
And yeah, like, let 2020 be a lesson in the uncertainty of life, right? Like, me for one, I had plans to travel for most of 2020. I didn't know what was coming around the corner. What happened and how it happened and everything is up for debate. But like, the whole lockdown, not being able to travel, restrictions, etc. Like, I didn't know. Even at the start of 2020, I did travel. I traveled for 2 months in South America, and even come February, end of February, early March, I was still in my mind like, yeah, I'm going to be traveling like again in a month or 2 months time. I still didn't know. And it's like that, if anything, is proof in the pudding that you literally never know what's around the corner. You can have the plans. You can say you want to do this, you want to do that, or you could be going there or meeting this thing or doing that. But you don't know. It could change in an instant, literally. And I think for me, that was one of the real big lessons from that, is like, yeah, like we don't know. We really don't. Like a meteor could hit the earth tomorrow. I don't want to make this morbid, but like a meteor could hit the earth tomorrow. You don't know.
Yeah. And you could die tomorrow, and again, not to make this super morbid, but like that's the reality. And it's not to say like, oh, quit everything and just like spend all your money and do all that stuff. But there's a state of being that can come with that recognition that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's no guarantees for tomorrow, even. So it doesn't mean go and blow everything and just, go crazy with your life, but just be attentive to the moment. Like that's it. That's the root of, or the peak of our existence is the moment we're experiencing, because that is all we ever are. And I actually want to bring this up when you were talking before, about awareness of the moment and being present. And I do Instagram Q&As sometimes, and someone asked me, how do I grow my awareness? Like, I want to become more aware. And I said, stop trying to grow it, because your attention to this moment is as aware as you can ever possibly be. Your attention to this moment that you're experiencing right now is the most aware that you can ever possibly be. So as long as you think there's more awareness to get to, you won't be attentive to this moment. You'll be looking into the future, trying to gain that awareness. And it's like, you have all of it right now. You have everything you could ever possibly need right now. But those ideas, those stories, those beliefs, those desires to gain more and get more is what keeps us from recognizing that everything is available right now. The peak of our entire existence, all of our reality, the meaning of life is this moment. But as long as you're lost looking for it, you'll miss it every time. And so many people look for it their entire life, only to recognize sometimes later in life, sometimes never at all, that it's been in front of them the entire time. And attention to the moment that they're experiencing is all they ever had to do to let go of the fear and the worry and experience the peace that they've been striving for their entire life.
Yeah, you know what? I love that. It reminds me of I heard someone say once that more, different, and better don't exist, because more than what, different than what, better than what. Like if we're talking about what you're saying. If we really slow down to the present moment, there is no more, there is no different, there is no better. We have the infinite potential to access whatever you want right now. When you stop trying to, like, you can't have more awareness. You can't have a different experience, because different doesn't exist. It only exists because you're putting a label on it. You can't have a better situation in your life, for example, because this is all you have. It's all you ever have. So when you buy into the more, different, and better, you're buying into an idea that something outside of the present moment exists, or something outside of what you can access in the present moment exists, which it doesn't, because like you said, this is all we have. Life is just a constant unfolding of now after now after now after now after now, and that's it. And the more we wake up to that, the more we realize there's actually not that much that we have to do. There isn't actually anything we have to do to be more present, or be more aware, or be more conscious, or be more loving, or be happier. It's like you don't, there's nothing to do that. You just be it.
Yeah. Yeah. You let go of trying to be anything else. And that's what it comes down to, is recognizing that you are the eternal now. Now is all that's ever been. It's all you've ever been. It's all you've ever experienced. It's all you ever are. And with those more, different, better, like, you're spot on. Like, those are all subjective. Those are all relative. Those are all things, like, for example, even the idea of strengths and weaknesses. Like, I was having a conversation on another podcast a couple months ago, and they're kind of like arguing with me about a lot of this stuff. It got kind of tiring, honestly, but they were saying how, like, oh, strengths and weaknesses are objective. Like, I can't jump 3 feet in the air, therefore I, like, jumping is not a strength for me. I was like, okay, on Earth, but hypothetically, let's say you go to another planet and there's another species and everyone can only jump 1 inch off the ground. All of a sudden you can jump a foot off the ground. All of a sudden that's strength. And, they argued that because they're like, well, we're not on another planet. I was like, fucking A, dude. Like, it's the point is that it's subjective, and it's only relative to how you perceive yourself relative to everyone else. And when it comes to comparison, like, you don't actually know what anyone else's life is like. And for social media, for example, like, their highlight reels, you don't know what their life is actually like. So you're comparing your entire life that to someone else's 0.01% of their life if they're using Instagram as a highlight reel, for example. So, and you're seeing what they want you to see. You're not seeing everything, but then you're seeing everything in your life. So, even to have like the more different, better, like, oh, they have a better life than me. And you don't see every aspect of it. You don't see the internal suffering that they potentially experience. Maybe they don't suffer at all, but you don't know that. So focus on you and where you're at, and recognize that your experience can't be any different than it is right now, but it doesn't mean you can't work towards change to make it into something different. But as long as you're caught up in wishing it was different or hoping that it'll be different, you're not going to recognize the influence that you have over your reality right now, because you're so caught up in the future, in hope, in the external, in foisting responsibility onto everyone else but yourself. So recognizing that you do have a lot of influence here and now, but only ever here and now. And you recognize the responsibility that you do have for your response, which is what response comes from, responsibility, your response to the situation, your response to the situation that you're in is you have influence over. So letting go of the belief that, oh, I wish I had someone else's life. It's like, you don't know what their life is actually even like. So it's pointless to waste the energy trying to imagine being in their life, because you're exactly where you're supposed to be, whether you think you are or you aren't. And you have the potential to be anything when you let go of all the beliefs about what you think you are, and question everything you think you are, because it's never the truth of what you actually are.
Yeah, the exactly where you need to be is a powerful one. I wrote a short story last week, I think it was. It's like a fictional short story, like of that as a learning. I'll send it to you after this, but I've just said it on here. So for anyone who's listening as well, if you're interested in reading my short story, then contact me and I'll send it to you. But it's a really interesting one, because it's true. Like if now's all we have, then the only place we ever need to be is here. That there isn't somewhere else that we have to be. There isn't somewhere else that we should be, that we could be. We're just here. And it's like slowing down to that's really important. And something I'm really noticing as a bit of I don't know if you want to call it a trend, but it just seems quite obvious to me, is a lot of the people who are having these types of conversations that we're having seem to be of a certain age, of a certain younger age bracket, shall we say. And a lot of the kind of older generations are very focused on like the how to be happy, how to fix this, how to heal that, how to be at peace or whatever. And I'm interested to get your take on why do you think that, like, let's say people who are like, generally speaking, it's people who are like 35 and under, that's very general, but like seem to be more looking in this direction of like, there isn't really a how to, it's just like waking up to the fact that now is all we have.
Yeah, no, I think that could be an awesome conversation to get into. And I don't, off the top of my head, like necessarily know the generational reasons potentially, but I think there were probably some things that instilled this desire for control. And I think our society clings to that sense of control and that desire for certainty in an uncertain world. Like, it's uncertainty is our biggest collective fear out there. And so older generations, they become more solidified. And I don't know if it has to do with just like the way that sort of upbringing happened, like post-war sort of situations and desire for control with things like that. But when people get very caught up in like, oh, all you have to do to be happy is this, and this. All you have to do to get exactly what you want is follow me and do this, and this, and then you'll be happy, and blah, 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 blah. And so it's clinging to this idea of control, which doesn't actually exist. And we have this belief that we know at all times what is best for us. And I think that maybe is what our generation is more clearly recognizing, is that, maybe I don't know what's best for me. And we're starting to ask more and more questions, like even when it comes to religion, like people joining the church is at an all-time low because people are just questioning more. Like so many things that people just took to be the truth because other things couldn't really argue with it or whatever. Like people just pushed on religion. They were like, oh, that's just, how it is. If I do this, then I'll go here and all is well and dandy. And I think people are just starting to question that and recognize that, like, I don't know, for me at least, like freedom lies beyond clinging to false senses of certainty, is relaxing into the recognition that everything is entirely uncertain. And that is where the flow is found. And I would say that before I was saying like sort of peak of our experience is the moment that we're experiencing. And that is where flow happens. Like I think we've recognized more clearly that that idea of flow, of being one with the flow of reality, or being in flow state, as people have called it, which is essentially just experiencing an activity without so much sense of self involved. Like people will say when a singer, for example, like I think there's the story of Beyonce or Kanye or something, they're working on an album and they're just like in flow state. They forget to go to the bathroom, they forget to sleep, they forget to eat because there isn't that sense of self that's involved. They're just one with the action that they're doing. So I think our generation is starting to more clearly see that that's sort of the peak of things, which is getting yourself out of the way, which is not, the old school mentality of like building up that sense of identity and like having a really positive idea of yourself, or a very sturdy and structured idea of yourself, knowing who you are and all that stuff. It's like maybe you can't know who you are. Maybe it's impossible to know who you are as the knower. You can't be also that which is known, so I would argue that it is impossible. And as you let go of that idea of yourself, there is a ton of freedom, and you can more easily experience that flow state that's always available to us in every single moment when we question the idea of ourself, that belief about what we think we are. And so I don't necessarily, going back to the original question, I don't necessarily know why that is, but I guess, to throw it back to you, I don't know, do you have any thoughts? Have you thought about that at all? Why there may have been a shift between generations?
I think a lot of what you said I agree with. I think maybe the thing that because I'd probably I would put myself at the older end of that bracket, shall we say. So I'm able to see like 15-year-old kids who are like nearly 20 years younger than me, like getting into these types of conversations, which is something that when I was their age just wasn't a thing. And I think what I've observed is that people have, especially with I'm not blaming social media for this. I don't want people to get that wrong, but social media has opened everyone's eyes a bit more to how everyone else seems to be living. And as people have tried to keep up with that themselves, they've realized that they're just not happy doing it, because it's like they're chasing something, they're chasing a feeling, they're chasing something in the external. And that was definitely true for my life. Like, it took me until I was about 25 to realize like I had all of this great stuff going on in my life. Great job, great girlfriend, had my own car, was about to like buy my own property, like all of this stuff, but I was miserable. And he was like, well, hold on a second. Like, you guys have been telling me for years, like, these are the things that are going to make me happy. And I wasn't. So then I started looking in a different direction, and it's led me to here, like 9 years later or wherever it's been. And it's like that's what I'm really observing, is that like the younger generation have become more awake to that. They've become more awake to, actually, if I get the car, or I get the partner, or I get whatever, the clothes, or I get the iPhone, or I get the new thing, the new PlayStation, it doesn't actually make me happy. So it's like, okay, well, if that's not what's going to make me happy, like what is happiness? Where does it come from? And that's when, speaking from experience, I started to look in a different direction. So I feel that that's kind of playing its role as well, is that the younger generations, like I said, sort of, again, it's a massive generalization, but like 35 and under, shall we say, really looking in the direction of like, well, happiness is now, waking up to that, like letting go that we've been talking about is when you let go of the ideas, the stories, the beliefs, the way it should be, how it's supposed to be, what I should have, these things that I think are going to make me happy, etc., etc., etc. You let go of all of that. What comes through? Happiness, peace, love, gratitude. You know, all of the stuff that you're looking for by chasing the other stuff. It's like you said it yourself, like it's been there all along. You've just been looking in the wrong direction for it. It's like, you know, when you've got your phone in your hand and you're like, oh, where did I put my phone? Like, oh shit, like I can't find it. You're like looking around the room and you're like, oh shit, like it's in my hand the whole time. Or like, I do it with my glasses on my head and stuff. It's that. It's like we're looking around for this thing that's in our hand already, or in my case with my glasses on my head. And I think the younger generations are really starting to wake up to that because they've been exposed to, well, conversations like this, hopefully, but like they've been exposed to the reality of chasing something outside of you doesn't make you happy a lot sooner than perhaps, you know, I did for sure. I don't know about you, but like, and that's the kind of, that's what I get from it. Like, that's really that's my observation anyway, at least. I don't know if that resonates with you or with anyone who's listening, but that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, I totally see that, and I think the internet too has played a role in that to a degree. Just the age of information that we have, like there's just so much more access to all of those things. And you know, some may argue it's a double-edged sword, and that as we have more access to information, we have more access to information, more access to seeing other people. Whereas, you know, 50 years ago, you didn't really know many other people outside of your close knit circle. And so I think, you know, not to get too insanely deep, but when we're talking about, you know, looking around for salvation, looking around for meaning, looking around for happiness, it's like, and missing that it's right in front of us. It's like people are out there, and it's sort of tied into the belief and looking around for God and looking around for, oh, where is, you know, this savior? And then you have, you know, the other camp of people who are atheists who are like, oh, God doesn't exist. But I think what people miss, and this is sort of what my podcast is all based around, is what if you're God? What if everyone's out here looking for God somewhere else, or denying that God is anywhere else? But everyone's caught up in those two. And then it's like, well, what if there's a third camp? What if you're it? And what if your purpose is what you're doing right now? What if you are your purpose? What if that's the extent of it? So whatever you want to do with that recognition, like, go do. Absolutely. But there isn't a right way to do it. There isn't a wrong way to do it. Everything is permitted. There's nothing to avoid. There's nothing to fear, because you're it. You're eternity. You've always been and always will be, not this character, not this ego identity, but the truth of what you are as the eternal awareness of existence. So like there's nothing outside of that you have to be, because you're already it. You're already everything you could ever possibly be. And as long as you cling to the belief that you can become more, or that you can be diminished, and the belief that you're not whole and complete exactly as you are right now, which you always are, and nothing you could ever possibly do could make yourself more or less complete than you are in this very moment. When you recognize that more clearly, it's like, all right, what should we do? You can do anything. You're able to do and be anything, because you're already everything you could ever possibly be. And so that's sort of the root recognition of everything that cuts through all of the fear and suffering that we go through. But you know, it's a similar sort of deal where everyone's looking outside of themselves to the future, to all of the materialistic things, to get people to perceive them in a certain way because they get their validation, and feel that their worth is dependent upon other people's perceptions, which is the only reason anyone really wants tons of money and, you know, nice cars and a big house and all that, is just for external validation from other people. And that's how they think they're going to derive it. So as they recognize that there is no way to get more, be more complete or less complete, then it's like you don't have to do all that stuff anymore, and you can just start living for you.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of you are God. And I think that's it. It's like, for me, what I hear in that is that we have the, well, let me scale it back a little bit and step back a bit from what I was gonna say. What I hear in that is like, we are God is pointing us to the fact that we are made up of the same stuff that everything else around us is made up of. The molecules, the atoms, the, whatever, protons and quarks and all of this stuff that physicists talk about. And it's like the life force that runs through all of that and is concurrent in all of that is also in us. So we are it in a way. We are the one. We're part of the whole, and therefore we're part of the whole. We're not separate from it. Therefore we are it. Therefore we are, God, however anyone wants to define God, but that's what I get from it. And then with that, like you said, you then have the power to, I guess, create your experience however you want. We have a creative freedom in a way on how we experience anything, which is when the thought kicks in and the mind kicks in. It then gets creative with all the stuff we've been talking about, putting labels on things, the subjective nature of everything. That's just the mind being creative, and that's it. But when we step back from that and go beyond that and see the essence of what we are, it's God, and I'm probably gonna get some shit for saying that, like, but it's, when I say God, I don't mean like the guy in the clouds with the long beard or whoever. I mean like just the essence of life. We are it. We're no different from a tree other than the way that we look. We're made up of the same stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, different but not divided. And I think,
because different doesn't exist.
Division doesn't exist, only the perception of it. And all division is conceptual. And the division between me and you, even being across a massive ocean, is no different than the division I perceive between my wrist and my hand. It's conceptual, but it's entirely connected. And like you just said, we're made out of the same stuff. So, could it be that we don't even exist as something separate from anything, and we get caught up in thinking, oh, well, it's my mind and my brain and my hand and my head and my hair, but where's me? And I would argue that it's nowhere, or I like to say nowhere, or now here, another way of saying it. So yeah,
I need to write that down.
Yeah, I forget where I heard that first, but yeah, I am here now, I am now here, I am nowhere. And so it makes you wonder if this is all just a grand illusion, a cosmic dream, a nice hallucination, that I am even a human is up for debate, I would argue.
I mean, we could take this conversation to so many levels deeper, but maybe we'll save it for another time. But dude, I really appreciate the time today, and for you, sharing some of this wisdom and some of your experience with us. It's been really, really fun. It's been really interesting to have this conversation. And do you want to let people know where they can find out more about you, your content, your podcast, anything that you want to shout about?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much for having me on, Alex. I had a great time chatting. I feel like we would get along super well if I'm ever around London, or if you're ever. I'll be traveling pretty much all next year. I'm moving out of New York in like a month and a half to go to Costa Rica and then Vancouver Island, and then bounce around a little bit, but I'll probably be in Europe at some point, so I'll definitely let you know. But so my podcast is called Dualistic Unity. It's on my sweatshirt here for anyone watching on video. And that's, we pretty much get very, very deep, especially that last sort of stuff I was talking about. That's what we talk about like all the time, is all the depths of the recognition of what we truly are, beyond all of the labels and concepts that we cling to for those false senses of certainty. And then for my personal content, it's Instagram and TikTok is both at not Andrew Murnane. And Twitter is just Andrew_Murnane, I think, but I'm not on that as much. But podcast is definitely the main focus. We have like Patreon affiliate program for that. So that's all at dualisticunity.com. But if you go to my bio and on any of my accounts, you can get to all that good stuff there.
Awesome, man. Well, appreciate the time today, man. And if you're in Europe, London, UK anytime soon, man, we'll hang out for sure. Maybe we'll do this in person. That'll be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Would definitely be down, man.